A very warm welcome to you all. Welcome to Designing Cities for All.
The two-year activity program of Pakhuis de Zwijger,
in which we take a deep dive into designing products,
places and systems for all.
At every level, we can see certain communities being marginalized, being taken advantage of, and it's all part of the design.
When you're neurodiverse, you're in a world that isn't designed for you.
We're not the only species on the planet. The city needs to be also a city for the other species.
And we need to do something because the old structures in which we worked don't work.
Things won't change just if we just let things happen.
Instead of saying, what can we do to mitigate the impacts? We need to start asking ourselves, what is causing that?
Design is political, that we need to design processes, that we are all different, but there are things that unite us.
These are the things that need to be on the table, that need to be recovered in order to redesign the society.
Everything around us was once designed and can therefore be redesigned.
How do we teach design in a way where students can be really critical of the systems of power that have informed and dominated design?
Inclusion happens by design or not at all.
I think it's always some kind of a co-creation process, and you have to make very little steps and then figure out together what works and what doesn't.
it takes as much time to do something good as it takes time to do something bad.
All design tells a story.
But there's also a bit of a need to not just write ourselves into the past, but also kind of write ourselves into the future.
I invite you so much to join my path of liberation, and I'm hopefully being welcomed by your path of liberation.
We have to heal collectively. We have to help each other understand some of these constructs that actually divide us.
Not fitting in was a blessing, or I would have turned out just like you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your patience as well. Now we're going to start the online viewing as well. So we start with the bumper, but I would like to invite my first guest here on the table at the seats. I'm so used to a table that even when there's not a table, I refer to it. Please give a warm hand to Janna Bystrykh. Thank you, Janna, and thank you for your patience. I know for a filmmaker, this is like living hell. A warm welcome to you. We're going to talk in depth more, and I would like to invite Clement Driesen as well. A warm welcome to him as well, please. Let's start the live cast, and then we'll move on with the program. Good evening and a warm welcome to you from... A very warm welcome to you all. Welcome to Designing Cities for All.
The two-year activity program of Pakhuis de Zwijger,
in which we take a deep dive into designing products,
places and systems for all.
At every level, we can see certain communities being marginalized, being taken advantage of, and it's all part of the design.
When you're neurodiverse, you're in a world that isn't designed for you.
We're not the only species on the planet. The city needs to be also a city for the other species.
And we need to do something because the old structures in which we worked don't work.
Things won't change just if we just let things happen.
Instead of saying, what can we do to mitigate the impacts? We need to start asking ourselves, what is causing that?
Design is political. That we need to design processes, that we are all different, but there are things that unite us.
These are the things that need to be on the table, that need to be recovered in order to redesign the society.
Everything around us was once designed and can therefore be redesigned.
How do we teach design in a way where students can be really critical of the systems of power that have informed and dominated design?
Inclusion happens by design or not at all.
I think it's always some kind of a co-creation process, and you have to make very little steps and then figure out together what works and what doesn't.
It takes as much time to do something good as it takes time to do something bad.
All design tells a story.
But there's also a bit of a need to not just write ourselves into the past, but also kind of write ourselves into the future.
I invite you so much to join my path of liberation, and I'm hopefully being welcomed by your path of liberation.
We have to heal collectively. We have to help each other understand some of these constructs that actually divide us.
Not fitting in was a blessing, or I would have turned out just like you.
A warm welcome to you all. We just saw a short recap of 2 years designing cities for all. And now we're here back in the Zwijger. And those next 2 years, we're going to focus on regeneration and regenerative design, together with 6 Designing Cities for All fellows and a lot of designers, storytellers, artists, scientists, and other experts. Today, we've got a Designing Cities for All special, and here in the room, we've just viewed the documentary Great Plans by architect and researcher Janna Bystrykh, who's here at the studio with me. Give her a warm welcome, please. We discussed what we just saw. That is an audiovisual journey across Northern America, Great Plains. And we won't just be talking to Janna, we will be talking to other experts as well. In the room tonight are also Dutch regenerative farmers and scientists from universities here in the Netherlands. And together we will reflect on regenerative agriculture. There's also a live audience here, so a warm welcome to you as well. And a warm welcome to everybody who's watching at home. For those at home, you can have your piece in this program as well. And you can join into the conversation. If you have any questions, please go to menti.com. And there you will be asked for a code. If you tap in the code 45352604, so that's 45352604, then you can join in. You can pose your questions here as well. And if you make sure that you mention who the question is aimed for, I'll get that here on my iPad, and I will ask questions for you to the panel. So those are the most boring messages I have. And now for our first panel discussion. We will have 2 panel discussions tonight as well. And Janna is joined by Clemens Driessen. A warm welcome to you. And through Zoom, we've got Kelsey Scott and Jimmy Emmons. Jimmy and Kelsey, are you there? Yes, they are. There's no voice yet. Can you speak up whether just to check whether?
Hello.
Yes. And
hello.
Yes, you are there. So we're off. A warm welcome to you. We will return to you in a minute. But first, Janna, I would like to start with you. Together with your team, you made a documentary, or the visual that we just saw. And you trained as an architect, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
And you're the head of architecture at the Academy of Architecture here in Amsterdam. How does that fit in with making a film about regenerative farming in the United States?
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that question. I think it is an important question to discuss. I also have somewhat of an open-ended answer, I would say. For me, it started with a fascination of the landscape. It really started, it's a landscape that I think many of us have an image of, the crop circles in the middle of America. But for me, it was also very, I was excited to understand kind of what kind of implications the social policy, the economic policy, agricultural policy have on a landscape like that. And so with that fascination kind of came a journey. But I think linking it back to architecture, I think as a profession in the current climate transition, climate emergency, we also have to look at ways where our responsibility lies as spatial thinkers. So it's very much about understanding of, yes, we're all, I think, familiar and comfortable with our roles in the urban setting, but what are our roles today as spatial thinkers when it comes to spaces beyond the cities? And kind of from that, kind of there are many formats, and I think that's also part of the discussion that we're having at the Academy as well with our students. What is the role of the architect if we think about 20 years forward, 50 years forward? What is the role of the architect at the moment that we come to a decision that we are going to construct or no longer construct, or what is our new domain, and how do we apply that? So it's as much as experiment as it is a proactive action.
But then again, why the Great Plains? Because thematically we have to deal with monocultural farming here in Europe and the Netherlands as well. Why except for the the fascination for the landscape, did you choose the Great Plains?
Part of it was also circumstance. So I contributed to an exhibition that was curated by AMO, which was at the Guggenheim in 2020. Yes. So we were looking with our students from the GSD, Harvard Graduate School of Design. Some of the students were looking at the Great Plains, and for me, it is the space that is one of the most productive landscapes when it comes to crop production. At the same time, it's not simply a kind of a synthetic landscape. It's about a movement. It's about the communities, and that was also kind of the triggering next step of how do you engage with such a landscape. You can film it, you can interview people, you can just visit it. But I think what inspired me, and kind of that's where the journey element comes in, is in one of my visits, and I visited the area several times, I was in conversation with a farmer, or a precision farmer, so very tech focused, who also started talking about regenerative, and kind of that got me hooked of like, what is happening here? What is he talking about? And so then the lockdown came, and for me it was like, yeah, what do you do in a lockdown? So then we had another conversation. It was like, how many people are working in this way? How many people are exploring this? And it ended up being a very large community. So for me, then again, the spark of being a designer, being a spatial thinker, of like, I want to be able to engage with these people and to hear their stories of what is happening on a physical.
Just hopefully a very short answer, because if we've got time restraints. We see the landscape, we never see the people, we never see the farmers. No. Why is that?
That was a conscious choice, because I think also the landscape, we are familiar with it, I think, from a satellite view, so the crop irrigation circle. So that was the idea of like wanting to understand the scale of it, and that was the choice for that. And not showing or not focusing on the individual, because I think it's a movement, and I think that's what the idea behind that was. Is like, how do you capture a movement, and that it's not simply a one-off story.
Great. I wondered, is everybody familiar with the terms that are being used in the film, like tillage, or do we need an explanation about that? Can you just quickly?
Yeah, very quickly. Yeah, so tillage refers to plowing. So it's basically any kind of physical impact on the soil that you kind of would scrape the soil, open up the soil, which is a tradition in agriculture, of course. But what a lot of these people in this community is saying that it's not necessary from the agricultural point of view.
Great, thank you. Clemens, you're a researcher and lecturer at Wageningen University, and you call yourself a cultural geographer.
Yes.
What does that mean?
It means I'm interested in landscapes and people, a bit very similar to what Janna was saying. But also to try and understand how people live in landscapes and live with animals and crops, and how that all works.
And you've got an involvement in the film as well, right?
Yeah, Janna invited me on some of her interviews, which started for me also to kind of, even though I've never been to the Great Plains, an incredible journey into this space and into these people. And to me, I got very much fascinated by the ways which also what I've been studying in the Netherlands, how farmers basically deal with all these massive debates that are circling around, and what that actually looks like when you stand on the ground or when you have to practice.
In regard to that, when we see the film, what is the debate in the Netherlands with farmers really about?
That's a wonderful question. I don't think even I'm in a position to answer that. What I am fascinated about when I was working on this and helping Janna and thinking about our discussions in the Netherlands is that we seem to completely lack any kind of curiosity or openness to point of views of farmers and what they're doing and what they're trying and what they're what they're working on. And this is actually quite, in a way, quite shocking. And so one of the outcomes for me also of this project could be that we realize, wow, I mean, this is a spectacular landscape. So it raises curiosity of what it looks like to work in it. And then you see all the nuance and all the struggle and all the connections with food systems, with histories. But of course, similar stories can be told here. And that's what I'm curious about.
Janna talked about a movement, about regenerative farming. Is that movement happening here as well? Because that I do miss that in the debate. And I'm under the impression that a lot of farmers still, love the traditional ways of farming. Or am I mistaken?
In a way, there's almost no way to find out, right? So let's go on that journey.
Janna, you've got your work sorted out for you. Kelsey, I would like to go to you. You're one of the people who was interviewed in the documentary as well, and you're a fourth generation calf producer in South Dakota, and you run your farm with your husband. And you call yourself the 150th generation to steward the plains. What do you mean by that?
Actually, she just messaged me and her electricity went off and she's trying to get back on as we speak.
Then there's a cliffhanger there. But Jimmy, thank you for giving us that message. There's a question for you that I'd like to pose as well. Because you and your wife, you manage a large cropland and rangeland farm in Oklahoma, and you do use regenerative methods. And you're also an international leader in the soil health movement. What does the use of regenerative methods means to you?
Well, it means rebuilding the soil. We're trying not to use chemicals. We try not to use tillage to tear the soil apart. We try to get back to Mother Nature and let the biology create nutrients for us like it was originally designed. So it's more about getting back to nature and understanding the ecosystem below the ground as well as above the ground to really understand that it can provide us with nutritious food if we let it. So lessen the impact on the land from humans. It really helps.
I'm very curious what that looks like in practice, because if you don't use tillage, what do you do? Because for generations, that's the method in order to work the soil. So
instead of plowing to plant a crop, we use a no-till drill that will drill right into the soil without much disturbance. We let frost terminate a lot of our cover crops, and then we plant our winter crops into that. So we just don't need tillage once you get into a system like this. There is some means of termination, like roller crimping, where you run a wheel and it has bars on it that kills the crop that's growing so you can plant another one. So little disturbance as we can on the land. And I see Kelsey's back now.
Kelsey's back, but I've still got a question for you before I get to Kelsey. What I really want to know is as well, soil is very important, of course, but why is it so important? What role does it play in the whole of the ecosystem?
Well, the soil is everything. I mean, without it, we don't have water, we don't have food, and we have to have the basics. So with tillage, you seal the surface of the soil up where water can't penetrate down through it. So that's very important. The soil and the biology in the soil will provide enough nutrients for plants and animals to live on, like it was before the breaking out of the land in the Great Plains.
But can we ever go back? Isn't it an illusion to think that we can go back and turn methods around? That's the cynic in me talking.
Yeah, we can. We've proven it through the Great Plains with everybody that was on the video. The movie has talked about that, and we can do that, and we can still be very profitable, and we can grow crops and food to feed people. So, yes, we can.
Thank you. Kelsey, welcome back. Like I just explained, you're the fourth generation cow-calf producer in South Dakota, and you run the farm with your husband. And you also call yourself the 150th generation to steward the plains. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, sorry about that. My electricity is still off. It took me a little bit to troubleshoot internet access without electricity. For me, I make that statement in my introductions to pay respect to the people that were on this landscape, stewarding this ecosystem into what it's evolved to be long before me. And I feel very fortunate to be a descendant of the Lakota Oyate, the Lakota people who roamed the Great Plains as stewards and stockmen of the cloven-hoofed bison herds that roamed the prairie. And so we try to really mimic and honor the relationship that Indigenous peoples had with this landscape as we continue to enhance and evolve the management of the landscape that we now get to steward right here on our ranch.
Right. You honor your ancestors in a way, but what values lie behind that, that point of view?
Yeah. Bigger, stronger, and smarter, and she will outlive us all. And so we do everything that we can to mimic nature and to identify ways to learn from what Mother Nature is trying to tell us as we navigate decision-making on the day-to-day operations of the ranch. We also recognize that humans, we are one of the keystone species of this ecosystem. We do not own or exert dominion over the system. We're a part of the system. And so we have to really navigate decisions in a way that appreciates the concert that we must play with the other species in the system.
Right, and that was just a small disturbance. So what you state is Mother Nature is will outlive us all and is smarter as well. But with that concept, what does that look like in daily life? How do you put that into practice?
Absolutely. So we're cow-calf producers that we actually have our cows calving in May and June rather than March and April, which is when a lot of cow-calf producers have their cows calving. That allows us to avoid the weather, which is what's taken away my internet right now. And it gives us a chance to match our animals' needs with when the ecosystem produces the most robust nutrition for the animal. Some additional things that we do is we always build in rest periods for our pastures that are longer in nature, that span different times of the year each year. So we're kind of mimicking that aspect of large herds grazing across the landscape and then leaving it to rest until it recovers. And we're doing everything we can to mitigate, if not completely eliminate all chemical use that's within our control right here on the ranch, and recognizing the more biological methods for controlling disease or pests, and really recognizing that pests, weeds, all of those things are just indicators for us, and they're helping Mother Nature tell us how the system needs to be managed.
Right. But what does that mean for me as a customer? Does that mean that I will miss my strawberries in the middle of winter?
Well, it might mean that you get to learn about a different food product that is actually ripe for the picking in the middle of winter. But yes, if you are to look at indigenous diets, there was a capitalization on the foods that were ready for harvest during those time frames. And so that does offer an idea that we may have to adjust or better inform our palate of some different food choices when it's not the prime season to harvest what we're hoping to be harvesting year-round.
Great, thank you so much for now. Janna, I wonder what role, because we're designing cities for all, what role does design play in the story of regenerative agriculture?
I think at the moment it's primarily telling the story. I think kind of this where the film also starts, that 70% of the soil is degraded across the world. I think we have to also, as designers, operate with that realm. of every building that we develop or the cities that we are living, there is a lot of soil that is not alive anymore. And we have to, in order to restore nature, in order to restore biodiversity, I think we have to be conscious in all spatial practices that we are in conversation with nature and that we are supporting a nature positive movement also in our practices.
Is that all we can do, Clemens? Just tell the story and raise an awareness, or is there more we can do as designers?
Yeah, I guess. I'm not a designer, so I teach designers.
No, but if you look at the whole context, what roles should everybody play?
I think it's interesting from various different roles to think of what happens if you are curious for what goes on in all these fields, and there's lots of interconnecting, and that's I think one of the lessons also for me of this film, all these interconnections between themes and domains and science and policies and like we now get some details on what it means of crop insurance, but of course in the Netherlands we have our own policies that kind of define what happens where and who does what. And to really unpack that and to come together with lots of different people to come up with different ways of organizing how space is used and how we can imagine different uses of space. I think that's interesting.
You're connected to Wageningen University, so you have to deal with students a lot. How do you translate this to students?
Actually, yeah, a couple of years ago we had a student group during lockdown. We had students who normally would go and do a project as landscape architects or planners in an area in the Netherlands. We had them work remotely to reimagine a farm in North Dakota. But also currently we're working on we're looking at the type of challenges that we're dealing with that are to help us think space and agricultural space in new ways.
Are there any questions from the audience, things you would like to know? Yeah, go ahead. Oh, there's a
Thank you.
a very basic question. And in short, what's the question again? So that everybody at home can hear it as well.
Just like, to what extent can you see regenerative farming practices in the film that we've seen just now? Because it seems quite large scale.
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. Thank you for asking that. Because the essence of it is that the scale doesn't matter. So scale is a ideological question in that case. Is a farm at a certain point too large? Because then you lose the connection to your soil and your plants and the living species there. But in essence, you could be a small farmer, you could be a large farmer. But what you see in the landscape is once the soil is not tilled, so you don't see the dirt anymore, you don't see the dust in these areas which are very windy, and you see kind of there is the patterns become different. So the fields look different. There is cover crops. There is residue. There are all these things happening. You see insects. You see butterflies, and so on.
Jargon question: what are cover crops for people?
Cover crops, yeah, that's also a good one. Yeah, so yeah, that's maybe a good idea. Maybe Jimmy could do that. Jimmy,
can you tell us what cover crops are?
Cover crops are something that you plant in between what you would normally harvest as a cash crop that would keep a living root in the ground all year long if you can, which I have more opportunity to do that here than in South Dakota. So it keeps the land covered from wind erosion and water erosion. We also use cover crops to grow nutrients, whether that be through a lagoon cover crop that would put nitrogen into the soil, or if that's another crop that would help loosen up some other nutrients. So it's something that you plant in between what you would normally harvest as a cash crop.
And that way you can prevent monoculture as well. Right. Okay. Any other questions from the audience? Yes, that's a question over there. The microphone is coming to you. There you go.
Hi. I was wondering, we've seen a lot of pros of the regenerative agriculture, and I'm only thinking, why aren't we doing this everywhere yet? Because it's only looking very positive. What are the cons for a farmer? Did you find out?
Anybody, Kelsey? Or
I'd be happy to start. I think one of the things that it really keeps producers captive in a system that is not regenerative is the capital system, access to capital, and who they are in debt to in order to finance their operations may not be knowledgeable of what a transition to regenerative agriculture could do for that producer's cash flow on a long-term basis. Just like if you were to start a new diet or a new mindset around your healthcare and your well-being, those first few workouts are really gruesome. They hurt. They don't always look the nicest. Your burpees aren't the most beautiful. The transition period to regenerative agriculture, when you're starting to really remove all of the chemical, all of the heavy tillage, all of the overuse and abuse from your system, can create a drop in your production income that can't always be substantiated by the producer and won't always be allowed by their lender. And so we have to just recognize that the transition does take time. It takes some patience. It takes access to funding to be able to withstand it. But the long-term impact that it creates is more of the reward that we need to focus our conversation around and help inform lenders about so that they can be in support of their producers making that transition.
Great.
And I'm sure that Jimmy has more to offer.
Very short, because we have to go to the next panel as well. Jimmy, have you got anything to add to that?
Well, I think it's one reason that's what they've been taught through universities and government, from the teens and the 1920s and forward. They were taught tillage and how to grow monocrops instead of growing multiple crops at a time. So I think it's part of that, as well as heritage of the farmer and rancher that grew up in that era.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you as well, Janna and Clemens, for sharing your stories as well. We're going to move to the next phase of our panel discussion. Please give them a warm hand while they're leaving us. And I would like to invite Esther Turnhout here on stage as well, because Esther is a chair of science, technology and safety at the University of Twente. Please give her a warm hand. And Roy Michielsen, please give him a warm hand as well. Roy works at a large-scale ecological farm in the Flevopolder, and it's quite close to here. And the farm was actually one of the first to introduce strip cropping, and that's in Dutch, that's strokenteelt. What is that?
It means that instead of growing crops in a large monoculture, that we grow it in small strips of 6 meters. In that way, we try to become less vulnerable for pests and diseases, and to create more biodiversity, or get more biodiversity in the field.
Right. And how is that working out?
Well, it is working out quite well. We started with this experiment in 2017, and well, we see that we are less vulnerable for pests and diseases. For instance, for our potatoes, we are less vulnerable for potato late blight, and that means that our potatoes can grow on average 2 or 3 weeks longer than in a monoculture. We see more biodiversity, so more insects, but also more birds, and we are able to maintain the same efficiency, or almost the same efficiency, as in a monoculture.
Can you call it a success story?
Well, yeah, we are quite successful, or we are enthusiastic about it, but we don't adopt it on all our fields yet, because we still face some challenges with mechanization, and so we try to further develop it.
Tell me more about the challenges that you face.
Well, for some operations, for instance, for irrigations, the machines that we use that are really focusing on monocultures, and you cannot use that in a strip cropping system. So there we're trying to find solutions for it. And another aspect is the harvest of the crops. For some crops, it is necessary that you drive next to the harvesting machine, and in a monoculture, that is not really an issue. But in strip cropping, it means that you have to drive over another crop, and that is sometimes difficult if that crop is not harvested yet.
So that's the cynical me again. This is never going to be a large-scale success, is it?
Well, I think we applied on a large scale. It is 100 hectares, so that is in the Netherlands. That is very large, and we believe that we are not there yet, but we have to further develop it. And we cannot do that by ourselves, but we have to do that together with other farmers, but also with industry and the whole supply chain.
New machines have to be developed in order to work with strip cropping, right?
Yeah, to work better with strip cropping. So we can work with it now, but we see that there are improvements possible.
Yeah. What is very interesting is that there's a saying that farmers in the past used the land in order to give it to their descendants. And so they want to be good ancestors. And nowadays, land is just being used to produce, and we're not thinking about the future. Is it possible to have that idea of regenerative farming or agriculture? Is that really feasible to have that in this industry or this time frame or in this system?
Yes, personally, I think it is possible, and I think also a lot of farmers want to be a farmer like that. But yeah, we are all part of a value chain, of a supply chain, and for some farmers, and I think it was also mentioned, we are stuck in a system that not always help us to make that change.
And supermarkets play a very important role in that as well, and the contracts that they have with the farmers. Is that system possible to have regenerative farming as well, or does that system, make the chance of success smaller?
No, I think we need a supermarket to make that step, and I think supermarket
to make what step?
Well, to get more to regenerative farming, that they also buy our products, or they want to pay a higher price for it.
Are they willing to move?
I see some things that they are willing to move, but it is, I think, not going fast enough.
Yes, like I said, you're a chair of science, technology and safety at the University of Twente. When you talk about the science of agriculture, you're planning for a reform of the way we do science, technology and research. What do you mean by that? How do we have to change that way?
I think some of this was also mentioned in the movie, that if you look at agricultural science on a global level, you will see that 95% of all the research funding and research output focuses on modern large-scale agriculture. And only 5% focuses on smaller farms and more diversified farming systems. So this creates actually sort of a knowledge inequality that that locks the system in further, because when you come with your stories about success and alternatives, it's very easy for people to say, where's the evidence? So we have all this evidence of the productivity of industrial farming, and there's not that much on alternative systems. And that argument of marginalization is used against these agroecology and these other alternative systems, further reinforcing that inequality. And I find that really quite shocking that science does not... I think it was said in a movie also, science is behind. Science is a follower. Yeah. And I find that, to be honest, quite shocking.
They should be spearheading it.
I think so, yeah.
But if you talk about large-scale farming, I mean, the past decennia, we in the Netherlands have chased ruilverkaveling, trading lands, and to create bigger companies, farming companies.
Yes.
Almost. So we are large-scale farmers here. So what use does it have to focus on small-scale farming, because that's not the reality now at the moment?
No, the reality now is that we have increasing large scale. So this process is actually still increasing. And the amount of farmers, if the number of farmers in the Netherlands continues to decrease. So there's now a lot of turmoil in the media about reducing the number of livestock. People are very angry about it, very upset about it. People seem to be much less upset about the continued reduction in the number of farmers. And that says something about the interests behind the whole narrative. Are not interested in farmers, not interested really in animals, and the profit they make from them. Yeah. So the drop in the number of farmers, the drop in the number of biodiversity, increase in the scale and increase in the concentration of capital and profit.
But that is interesting because we should change, and the media should change the narrative around farming.
Absolutely, yeah. But science should change too.
And science should change too, and be spearheading new systems and new ways of farming instead of focusing on the old way.
Yes, answering the research questions of the future instead of the interests of the current.
Why doesn't it happen yet?
Well, there's lots of different answers I could give to that. I think science is essentially conservative, so I think that's part.
It has
but funding has a large part to do with it as well.
And is the industry involved in science? Is farming industry involved in science as well, and in research as well?
There's almost no agricultural funding without industry involvement.
Wow.
And without Wageningen involvement, I can add to that.
Okay, Clemens, well, there's a discussion to be had at the bar at the end of this program.
It's not a diverse landscape.
It's not a diverse landscape.
No.
Okay, there's a lot of work to be done as well. Jimmy, I would like to go back to you. Your soil health crusade, you can always call it a crusade, has got an international scope. And do people from different countries have different needs or ideas or visions on this topic?
No, what we found out is we're all very different. We may farm in a different area around the globe, but we're very similar when you look right down to the basics. And so while there may be some difference in soils and in what we grow, back to the basics, it's all the same. And so what I found is by traveling all across the country in the world is it will work everywhere. It's just how you apply it to your region, to your weather pattern, to your local locale, and precipitation and heat factors as well. Because Kelsey and I are very far apart, and so she's still having winter, and I'm in the 80 degrees today, and we got green growing things already. So there's different ways to do that in them segments.
But what I do wonder as well is, are there any best practices on a global scale that we can learn from or apply in other regions as well?
Yeah, we have 5 basic principles of soil health, where little disturbance as you can on the soil, keeping a living root in the ground as long as you can through the months. Also keeping the ground covered to keep it protected from wind erosion and water erosion, and then to get diversity in that system instead of a mono system. And we do a lot of crops together now, companion cropping, where another cover crop will help a cash crop grow. So a bit more diversity in that. And then putting animals back on the land. In the Great Plains, there was lots of animals that grazed across the prairie. There were a lot of bison, there were a lot of elk, deer. I could name off, literally dozens of animals that grazed. And that's a missing component in most of the Great Plains now. And so as we put that back into the system, them 5 principles really works everywhere across the globe.
Yeah, because the animals restore the balance between bacteria and fungus on the land. But cynical me is here again. And I'll say that's really good and very good that you have researched that, but it's never going to work on a large scale, is it?
Well, no, I beg to differ. If in the film you heard from Brian Jorgensen in South Dakota that farms 16,000 acres. We farm a couple thousand acres, and I know several families that farm a few hundred acres. So on scale wise, yes, we can do that, but it's the major shift of thinking into a new paradigm. So that's the obstacle. And everybody says people don't want to change, but we've been changing since the beginning of time. If we hadn't been changing, we still wouldn't have a vehicle to drive. So it's not that we don't want to change, it's the way that we go about that change.
Right.
And the pressures from big agriculture companies that don't want us to change, that want us to be dependent on them.
Right. Okay, you've almost proved me wrong, but I'm not leaving the point yet, because Kelsey, now I'm going to try that with you. You call your farm hyper-local, and your customers are all in the direct vicinity of your farm. So, you know, it's really nice. It cannot ever work on a large scale, and there's no way we could combine this local focus with a global mindset of this day and age. Am I right?
I would say that the largest barrier we're up against as producers is the cynical mindset that you are presenting to us.
You're right.
Just to kick it back at you. I think the biggest lie that we're told as producers, and I allude to this a little bit in the film, is that we have to feed the world. That's on our shoulders. We have to feed our neighbors. We have to feed ourselves. That's all that we have to do. And if we all just do that, we will all be fed and we will all be well. And so for me, the fact that our business is hyper-local in who we serve as our customer base, that's not because we can't go any further or because the system won't allow us to. It's because we're intentional and that's who we want to serve. And I think that if we can empower more producers with the skills, the financing needed, and the space to be able to do that, we're going to really start to see our food system, large scale, make a large shift.
Yes, and I think you're totally right as well. And even in the Netherlands, our best crops and our best meat is being exported to somewhere else, and we don't use it. So that I think you've got a point as well. Damn, I love to be cynical, and now you're killing that for me. Esther, what is your vision on the global-local paradox?
I think Kelsey makes an excellent point. And I think trade and trade relations in food commodities are one of the ways, one of the mechanisms through which this intensification and increasing efficiency between brackets, right? Because actually it's not efficient, but efficient focus on the production of one tradable cash commodity is one of the things that killed food sovereignty. In many places. I mean, there is enough food. The problem is that we have too much of foods that we could do with much less of. We have not enough of food that we actually need more of, and we have a highly unequal distribution.
Yeah. If we talk about strip cropping again, you told us about the success of it. Almost 50 companies or farmers use that now as a system, but there are about 75,000 farms in the Netherlands. When will they all, refer to strip cropping?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it is already an achievement that when we started in 2015, we were the first farm that started with strip cropping, and now there are already 50 farms. I don't believe, and I think it is also not necessary that all farms in the Netherlands shift to strip cropping, but what we want to show is that adding diversity, of crop diversity in your system, that it really helps to get a more resilient cropping system. And what we try to tell other farmers is not that they have to apply strip cropping as we do on our farm, but see how it can help, or bringing diversity can help to improve their system. And so we want to let them think and try to shift.
Create that awareness and see that as a possibility you can shift to, and to realize that the soil is benefiting from strip cropping or other ways of regenerative agriculture.
Yeah.
But there are enough farmers, right?
Excuse me?
There's lots of farmers that would want to practice those kinds of forms of agriculture, only they cannot have access to land and capital at the moment. So access to land and capital is a major impediment.
Even in the Netherlands?
Yeah, lots of people want to start an agroecology farm. But because of the valley of death that was also discussed by the previous speakers online, there's this valley of death that the farmer has to go through.
What is the valley of death?
years of trying to build your soil with low productivity. And financing, risk assessment, asset management in financial institutions, all of these factors block that, but also laws on access to land block that. Right. So there are enough farmers, but currently they're not farming.
Yeah, we're moving to the final phase of this program. Is there any questions from the audience? There's a question over there, and there's a question over there as well.
Hi. Yes, I really liked the idea of stewarding the land together and having a community local to the farm, but with a huge produce like in Flevoland. You have regenerative practice. Is there a way we can take the narrative as a consumer, not just to depend on the media, to understand where we can be stewards of where to draw the line on what's not regenerative and what is regenerative, and what would be the most regenerative, like food forests, for example?
Anybody?
I find it a difficult question, but what I can say is that in the Netherlands we are a large-scale farm, and what we try to do is to get the regenerative food in the supermarkets, and we try to do that also with a short chain. So for instance, the red beet that we grow, we produce that ourselves and sell that directly to the supermarket. But on the other hand, I think in our area there are also a lot of farmers that try to sell directly to the market, and I think you need a combination, because there are some customers that are really like to go to a market and buy their products, but there is also a large group of consumers that just want to go to the supermarket and get their products over there. So I think you need a combination of both.
And there's a third movement as well. People just want to have it delivered at their home, and there are many corporations now that cater to that as well, to have it delivered at home, but buying straight from the farmers as well. There's a question from somebody watching at home. The question is regenerative agriculture, agroecology without the politics and social justice?
I think that's a great question. I don't know the answer to it. I'd
Should
like
it
to know too. I'm a great admirer of the politics of the agroecology movement, so I wouldn't say that.
And second part is, how do you counter the corporate co-optation and capture of regenerative agriculture?
Yeah, exactly.
But how do you do? We should. But how can you make sure that that happens?
Well, I think it's happening. So co-optation of these terms happens. It's also good in a way, because you need movements on different fronts. You need also change makers within the system, and they'll take smaller steps.
All right. Kelsey, Jimmy, anything you would like to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's very important that the consumers step up, and that's happening in the United States now, and wondering where their food's raised and how it's raised, and is eco-friendly and climate-friendly. And they want to know all that, and they don't want chemicals and all on their, and food preservatives on their food. They want fresh and local. But the system has been built for just in time. So as we saw the lockdown, that just in time mentality didn't work very well because we were all shut down. So we got to go back to some of that local, much like Kelsey was talking about, and not rely on travel so far. So I think that the consumer is very important to get that message across and put pressure on the markets to change.
And there is a responsibility and power with the consumers as well. A final question here from the audience.
Thank you very much. Last week there was a presentation of the PBL, Planbureau voor de Leefomgeving, English translation. And they make a summary of all the ambitions we have as a country on for the next 30 years till 2050. And they came up with 4 scenarios we have to choose from. And one is the mondiaal ondernemend, global entrepreneurship, fast world, Greenland, and regional grounded, regionaal geworteld. It sounds for me like we have to choose from one of them. But if you have a critical, cynical perspective, then you can say, do we have a choice?
Yes, do we have a choice?
Well, I'd like to think so. I'd like to think of our government as being able to steer in the direction of different scenarios, and they can do more than they say they do. But I think the Planbureau study, if I'm referring to the same one, makes very clear that we need to make some hard choices in order to really combine land use for climate, for biodiversity, and for food. And that really means changing some of the ways in which we use and govern land, and it means creating new institutions.
But that's a whole shake-up that we have to see, because we change the system, we change the narrative, we change institutions, we change companies, and we change policy as well.
Yeah, true.
Cynical me again, is that realistic?
Well, change is going to happen regardless, right? Regardless, climate change is happening, biodiversity loss is happening. It will affect all of these things. I think our choice is whether we let this happen as an inequality exacerbator, which is the trajectory that will materialize if we don't do anything, or we have the option to govern this for justice and equity and our common survival, I would say, and not just the survival of an increasingly small elite.
Yes, and do we make that change when there's a crisis at hand, which is almost here, or do we try to prevent that crisis?
Yes, I have to keep hope that we can do that, actually.
Let's keep that as a final thought. Let's keep the hope that we can change everything around in time. We've reached the end of the program, so I'd like to thank all our speakers that have talked to us here. So please give them all a warm hand. The next Designing Cities for All Regeneration episode takes place on Monday, May 1st, and that will be the first of our 3-part series called In Common, with our new Designing Cities for All fellow, Roberto Rocco. In this series, we'll explore the concept of commoning in working towards a regenerative future. And Pakhuis de Zwijger is collaborating with artists as well to develop a new community research program based on Designing Cities for All. It will take place in May and June at our location in Amsterdam New West, and will offer a variety of inspiring workshops, online lectures, and with international experts, urban tours, artist dialogues, and local community and resident meetings. The deadline to send in your applications is 2 weeks from now. For more info, please check out dezwijger.nl. And you can also become a friend of Pakhuis de Zwijger and support everything that happens here. And I would like to finish with thanking you for watching this program. It's been very enlightening, inspiring, and cynical me has, become a little bit less cynical, fortunately. And please give a warm hand for Janna Bystrykh for making the documentary. Thank you so much.